Stranger Things 4 has finished its run, so today we're going to stop and rank all 4 seasons of Stranger Things from the least good to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of the 4 seasons of Stranger Things. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list. And I would love to see yours, and let's get started. Coming in last place is Stranger Things 2. Now, to be completely clear, I enjoy this season. I rewatched it just a few weeks back, and if anything, I enjoyed it more than I remembered liking it. It follows up a lot of the plot points of the first season nicely, but I think they went down a bit of a Empire Strikes Back route with this season, broke the group up into different groupings. They thought that 11 was dead, so she's kind of off on her own little side quest the entire season. And in doing so, it just kind of lost some of the charm of the first season. Likewise, a bunch of the characters kind of have PTSD from everything that happened in season 1, so they're just in a much darker, mopier state, while being broken up into different groupings. And so some of that coming of age story lost some of its dynamic, lost some of the fun, some of the charm. Even just the idea of this group of boys, and you throw 11 into the mix, so they're hanging out with a girl for the first time, and when you kind of remove her out of it, just not quite the same dynamics. Along those same lines, so much of what drove the narrative of the first season was Will being kidnapped, and that created a story that had big emotional resonance for several of the characters, and this season doesn't quite have the same thing. There's a mystery about what's going on in the city and why crops are dying, but it doesn't have the same urgency and pull and weight as a child being kidnapped. And so when you lose some of the charm in the coming of age side, and then the story doesn't have quite as much of a hook to it, and it didn't have anything to replace all of that with. So I just felt it lost something. Now, I said, it's still a very good season. There's a bunch of things here that worked really well. The addition of Max and Billy, they fit well into the story that was being told. Whether Max is a new addition to this group of boys that are starting to get interested in girls, or Billy as kind of this antagonistic character that makes everything a lot more complicated. Then Steve Harrington gets a major upgrade in this season as a continuation of that arc that they gave him in season 1, and then by pairing up with Dustin, you get this friendship that you never knew you wanted and never expected to get from this show, but it works so well. It's so fun to watch. You get Sean Astin as Bob, who has such a tragic fate, but a character that's not big and flashy, but just a decent, good person that, once again, a nice addition into the mix. So there's a lot of things here that were really good, a lot of things that were enjoyable, but the plot as a whole felt a little bit too much like a rehash of the first season, while also losing some of the charm and the urgency of the original. In third place, Stranger Things 3. After a bit of a drab and dark second season, they came back with a bigger, brighter, and more fun third season of the show, where all of a sudden we have Russians in the town, a massive conspiracy going on. We've got a bit of an invasion of the body snatchers type situation happening. We've got huge creatures showing up. Everything is cranked up to this whole other level with this season, and they reorganize things a little bit with the characters. So while you have some tension amongst our main group of kids, you also get to have a lot of fun with them too, as they have dating issues, they're going to the mall, they're getting jobs, all sorts of teenage type situations are going on, and you get the hijinks of them as kids, but also them getting pulled into this massive story with all sorts of homages to other 80s movies. You got this Russian assassin guy that's highly reminiscent of the Terminator. You've got our adults trying to help this Russian spy guy that's just has a nice innocent charm to him while they're on this road trip. You got Hopper going for the Magnum PI look. Just so many fun 80s references all throughout the entire thing that just added the fun back into the mix with this show, all while taking it to this crazy new, much larger and bigger level with everything that they were trying to do with it. On rewatch, I don't think it held up as well as when I first watched it. I just appreciated how fun and big it went. On rewatch, there's a lot of things where you're like, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? How did a whole gigantic Russian base get built in underneath a mall? And why didn't anyone notice this? And so I had a few more questions about it. And I feel the way they did the Billy story is frustrating because he's such a jerk when he's introduced in season 2. And then here he's taken over almost immediately. And so you give him kind of this redemptive, cool final moment in the finale battling the monster. But because he hadn't been himself, it wasn't like a completion of an arc. He didn't have an arc. He was just taken over and then died doing the right thing, which isn't all that heroic when he was kind of forced into the situation. So I wish they kind of could have done that a little bit differently or given a bit of more of an arc inside of everything going on there. But in general, you could see some ways in which they were cheating to pull it all together, but a nice, fun, big Stranger Things season. Our runner-up, Stranger Things 4, and to me, this was the best and some of the worst of the show, but by the time it came to an end, I was all focused in on the best, so we're going to be in the number 2 spot on this list. Now, to talk about what didn't work so well for me on the front end so I can just rave about all the fun stuff on the back end, the first 3 episodes I thought were pretty rough. They, once again, reworked the characters, split them up into all these different places. So I wasn't really sure where things were headed. And some of the plot lines in particular, I just did not care for. Everything they did with Eleven being bullied and being unable to cope with where she's at and respond to things appropriately and not having her powers to empower her, I was not crazy about any of that. And I thought it was just kind of overcooked a little bit of everyone at this school is a sociopath and they're trying to work both with her mind as well as the audience, mess with the audience a little bit of we don't know if she's a monster and killed a bunch of people. So they're trying to imply that she has these rage issues that might snap out. And so they have this moment where someone humiliates her, mocks her dead father, is just horrible to her. And then she hits the girl with the roller skate and then it plays it as if what has Eleven done instead of this is the 11 that made a kid pee himself, like an 11-year-old pee himself in the first season and then broke the kid's arm. Like, that's what we celebrated in season 1. And now we're like, you're a monster. You were mean to that poor girl that has been horrible to you for months, saying unbelievably shocking, disturbing things while getting a group of people laugh at you. I just I did not enjoy that at all. And then it gets abandoned at the end of episode 3 when we go off on her real quest for the season. And so it just in general, I think splitting them up as much as they did, adding new characters without cutting anyone hurt this season a good bit, especially in the first half. But once it got going, once we started focusing in on the actual big, gigantic, epic story of everything going on here, you got some of the best Stranger Things we've ever gotten. Vecna is a very different type of villain because he's actually has a personality that has an objective, a mission, a motivation, a backstory. So he's a very different type of character, but the way he's used to kind of pull everything together, I think was very cool. He's very Freddy Krueger inspired, kind of messing with people in this sort of dream world of sense by going into their head. The way he kills them is shocking, sticks in your head. It's memorable. And so they used him really well to be able to have these big reveals and make it so you care about this character being defeated. Along these same lines, because we're telling such this big, gigantic, epic story where Eleven must regain her powers and Hopper must escape and everyone else must figure out the mystery of Vecna in order to come up with a plan to defeat him. And it takes its time developing all of these plot lines, spending time making it so clear what everyone is trying to do and why it matters. It means that once you move into those final 2 episodes, you can tell this very complicated finale with so many moving parts in 3 different realms on 2 continents and 2 different states with like 7 different fronts, but you can track along with all of it because they took their time and told the story properly. And so it was so satisfying. Throw into the mix some fun new characters. Eddie being, of course, the big, gigantic standout here, where they managed to come up with this scenario that's so ridiculous of him doing a metal song in the shots that are in the trailer. Like, how are you gonna pull off music video footage in this show? How's this gonna work? And they did it. They created a scenario where it makes total sense in light of his character, in light of the scenario, that this bizarre thing would play out, and then they tie it into just being the score for the segment. So many cool things. You get a finale where you get all these different elements, whether it's Nancy with a double barrel shotgun, Hopper with his Excalibur, flaming Vecna, so many cool things happening. So much of this season was so great. Other stuff that was also like, to make all these things happen, I think they had to cheat a little bit to make the logic of everyone doing everything at just the right time. But in general, they swung for the fences. They went big. And once you got past the beginning part, they knocked it out of the park for the most part for me. There was stakes for individual characters, for the city. There was consequences. As much like season 2 had some Empire Strikes Back-esque elements, so did this season, where our heroes kind of win in the end. But honestly, they pretty well lost at the same time, and they're going to have to rally to try and defeat Vecna in Stranger Things 5. So a nice, solid season that by the end delivered everything that I wanted. But coming in at number 1 is going to be Stranger Things 1, and rewatching the entire show over the last month, I was just reminded of how this is one of the best seasons of television of all time, where it starts off with a fairly simple situation of a child disappears that launches this manhunt, and in doing so builds out this fantastic mythology with a great set of characters and gives them real character arcs. Now, of course, our main group of kids in it at the time were just these little tweens that acted like real kids, that were immature. They have friend bonds, rules of their friendship. They felt real and human, and then they were taken off on this big, gigantic, exciting adventure. And then thrown into the mix, it's this group of boys that for the first time see a girl that they're friends with and joins their group, and one of them has feelings for her. And it just makes for an engaging, grounded story while being soaked in the supernatural at the exact same time. But to me, so much of what elevates this first season is what they were able to do with Hopper as well as Harrington. With Hopper, you introduce him and he's just kind of the cliche local sheriff that's kind of checked out, not engaging. Like, sure, you're overreacting. Your son went missing. Kids do that. And then as it keeps moving along, you start to realize the kid really is missing. And then we learn about his backstory, and we see this man who has so much greatness in him, but he's been so broken down by life that he's become cynical, and he just comes alive through this mission to save Will, that all of a sudden he's willing to do anything, put his life on the line because he has to save this kid because he couldn't save his own daughter. There's just something deeply, deeply compelling about that and what they were able to do with his character throughout the season. And likewise, because Steve Harrington is one of the most likable and heroic characters of 2, 3, and 4, when you go back and you watch season 1, it's so easy to forget just how insufferable and self-absorbed he was in season 1. And they give him an actual arc. They transform him by the end of the season. You hate this dude at the beginning, and by the end you're like, well, that guy's actually kind of cool. Wait, he's growing and changing. And sometimes people need to get punched in the face a few times to get their self-indulgence, their self-absorption out of them. And that's what Steve needed. Like, you need to be like, oh, wow, I am terrible to people. I am so full of myself. And he's transformed by the events of this season. And then just, of course, you get so many homages to classic 80s films, those Amblin films, the writings of Stephen King, while being its own original thing. Like, this is how you do it right, of taking all these things that you love and then doing your own thing with it. In certain ways, it's kind of like what George Lucas did with Star Wars, with looking at Flash Gordon and samurai films and mythology, and then he made Star Wars out of it. That's what Stranger Things is for 80s popular culture and kind of these creepy stories with kind of kids thrown into the mix. And it does it so very well. So much so that like it's reigniting a current passion for 80s and introducing the current generation to all this stuff. And it goes back to what they were able to do this season in creating amazing characters that you actually care about, a mystery that has urgency and momentum that you want to be solved. There's questions that you like the answers to them, and they're so satisfying. Just truly an excellent season of television on so many different levels. So it comes in at number 1. If you enjoyed this ranking, I've got more like it. You can check out some of my other videos right over here. I'm not even sure what YouTube is recommending to you right now. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.